Next in the broadcast, the Unification Ministry says when it comes to the two Koreas, it's a new era of reunification as it announces several projects are in the works, but Pyongyang still needs to agree. The trial begins into the heiress and former vice president of Korean Airlines for her so-called nut rage incident. Though she expresses her apologies, Cho pleads not guilty to charges that she violated aviation safety. And in the first installment of our special series of Startup Fever in Korea, we take a look at how private and public support are behind a more fertile field for the new businesses to survive. Primetime News begins now.
Welcome to Primetime News. Hope your week is off to a great start. Live from Seoul, I am Kang Tae-ri.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We begin with a preview of what's in store for Korea's foreign affairs this year. Related government bodies presented their 2015 blueprint to the president on this Monday.
And topping their agenda was paving the way for inter-Korean unification. Our Hwang Sung-yi reports on these initiatives.
In the 70th year after the division of the Korean Peninsula, the Unification Ministry wants to launch a new era of reunification. Various events with North Korea are part of the plan, including a test run of a railway across the inter-Korean border around Liberation Day in August. The train will take off from Seoul and make stops at the North Korean border town of Kaesong and the capital Pyongyang before its final stop at Sinuiju. Sound unrealistic? Unification Minister Ryu Gil-jae says the ministry has all the data it needs.
There will need to be discussions between South and North Korea on the issue, but once North Korea agrees, I think the project won't be hard to carry out.
In its talks with the North, South Korea is seeking fundamental solutions to humanitarian issues like reunions for war-separated families. It's also willing to discuss more aid to Pyongyang. The idea includes the construction of multiple farm complexes in North Korea and training for its workers.
We are planning to extend development assistance to North Korea to help it build the groundwork for autogenic capability.
To ensure these reunification efforts will continue past the current administration, the government plans to introduce new legislation. This includes training personnel to prepare for reunification and designating officials at each government ministry. But most of these plans need the cooperation of North Korea, which is still sitting on South Korea's month-old offer for talks. Hwang Sung-yi, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea plans to continue with its push to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula while improving its relations with Japan. Our Connie Kim tells us more.
The goal is to have the two Koreas talking again and denuclearize the Korean Peninsula at the same time. For the first part, the South Korean government says it will work to revive the six-party nuclear talks stalled since 2008. It says it's seeking trilateral cooperation with the U.S. and China and direct talks with North Korea. And one member that needs extra attention in the six-party framework is Japan. South Korea's top diplomat says high-level talks between the two nations, a possibility that's been tipped since late last year, is expected to lay a cornerstone for future-oriented relations.
Seeing a change in Japan's position will be a contribution for improving ties.
Seoul wants Tokyo to properly compensate the victims of wartime sexual enslavement, while Japan claims the issue was resolved through a 1965 bilateral treaty. While South Korea says resolving the issue is a precondition for the first summit between their leaders, the two sides seem to need some time, however, to see a breakthrough. Their latest meeting on the very issue ended with their delegations simply saying that they will continue to exchange views towards the issue. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The South Korean military says it will use more advanced technology in its equipment to enhance its defense posture. It's part of a plan for mounting a creative national defense against North Korea. Kim In-bin has more on what the weapons will look like.
Korea's defense ministry has laid out its plans for the year, with a focus on building a creative national defense. As part of the plan, the ministry plans to employ advanced technology to enhance its military capabilities and gain an edge over North Korea. The list of high-tech weaponry includes unmanned surface vehicles that will be capable of conducting offshore missions without jeopardizing the lives of military personnel. There are also plans to use robotics to boost surveillance capabilities on the front lines and equip soldiers with state-of-the-art gear. The ministry is seeking ways to better deal with Pyongyang's nuclear weapons development programs and to better fight North Korean troops, which outnumber the South roughly 2-1. Meanwhile, the ministry reiterated that it will proceed with a large-scale military exercise with the U.S. in March, despite the North's offer to suspend nuclear tests if the Allies halt the drill. The North sees the exercise as a rehearsal for war, while Korea and the U.S. say it is defensive in nature. During this year's drill, the two allies plan to strengthen their joint defense posture and set up a comprehensive plan to counter the communist regime's chemical and biological weaponry. The ministry said that maintaining a strong military posture of readiness guarantees a strong foundation for national defense and sets up a basis for a peaceful unification. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The woman behind the so-called nut rage incident on a Korean Air flight has pleaded not guilty to charges that she's obstructed aviation safety. Cho Hyun-ah, the former Korean Air vice president, had no comments for the court on the first day of her trial this Monday. She faces a slew of other charges, including assault on a plane and obstructing a government investigation. Cho's lawyers disputed most of the charges, saying they were not true or have been exaggerated. If convicted, Cho can face up to 10 years in jail. The high-profile case revolves around Cho's actions on a flight from New York City to Seoul last December. She allegedly became enraged over her in-flight service, resulting in the deplaning of a senior purser before takeoff.
A young Korean man who went missing in Turkey might have joined the Islamic State in Syria. Authorities in Korea say they have found pictures of Islamic State-related material on the teen's computer. Our Son Jung-in has more on how Korea and Turkey are trying to find out where he might be.
Seoul's foreign ministry says the 18-year-old man surnamed Kim was last seen on January 10th after leaving a hotel in Kilis, a town that straddles the Turkey-Syria border. His disappearance came to light 2 days later when Kim's travel companion, a Korean national in his 40s, reported him missing to the Korean embassy in Ankara. A Turkish daily newspaper reported on Saturday that Kim had crossed the border into Syria to join the Islamic State militant group after exchanging emails with one of its members. Authorities in Seoul initially cast doubt on the allegations, saying they had found no substantive evidence he was in contact with IS. However, new clues have come to light. Police in Korea say they found some photos on the teenager's computer showing IS members holding rifles and the group's distinctive black flag. And an employee of the hotel where Kim was staying in Kilis reportedly said he was wearing an Islamic-style headscarf and was carrying a full backpack as he left the hotel. The hotel employee said he thought Kim might have been planning on going to Syria, explaining that the area is a common route that foreign fighters take to join the terror group. Authorities in Korea and Turkey are working in close coordination to try and locate the teenager. If confirmed, it would mark the first known case of a Korean national joining Islamic State. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And in the latest update on this story, authorities in Korea have found evidence that the missing teen spoke to someone in Turkey a number of times through a social networking service called SureSpot. SureSpot is a mobile messaging application that uses exceptional end-to-end encryption for every text, image, and voice message. We'll bring you more updates on this story as they come out. Well, the future is looking brighter for startups in Korea, with even some believing that Korea is set to become Asia's Silicon Valley in the coming years. The government will dish out billions of dollars in grants and other subsidies to foster small and mid-sized businesses. In the first of our 5-part series on startups in Korea this week, here's our Kwon So-wa.
Over the past 35 years, only 3 startups have made it to the top 100 companies in terms of market capitalization in Korea. The fact highlights that conglomerates still dominate the Korean economy. But there are signs the corporate landscape is changing. The number of startups in Korea has been breaking records in recent years, reaching nearly 30,000 last year. That's more than triple the number seen during the dot-com bubble from the late 1990s to the early 2000s. The number of serious investors has grown too. Almost $1.3 billion was poured into startups last year, marking a 27% rise from 3 years ago. The startup ecosystem has also strengthened with a rise in angel investors, accelerators, and networks. Startup Alliance, a joint effort between the government and private sector, for example, arranges special events to connect startups with potential partners and clients.
Compared to Canada, where I'm from, Korean government, a lot of Korean institutions providing a really good environment to the people who are preparing to start a business. For example, this kind of a meeting and providing really good information, and there are a lot of seminars.
Experts say the new startup wave is different from the previous boom when e-commerce was still a fledgling business and internet connections were clunky. Now, net access is instant and easy and, more importantly, mobile.
A lot of small startups, they're trying to connect some kind of services to the smartphone and more efficiently than existing offline businesses. So there will be a lot of new innovations on that front.
President Park Geun-hye wants startups to lead her administration's drive to transform Korea into a creative economy. She has vowed to cut through red tape and provide financial incentives to them. In line with this, the government has earmarked $92 billion this year to support small and mid-sized businesses, including startups. Getting off the ground is one thing, but turning startups into profitable businesses is another. Korea's #1 web portal Naver, one of the most successful startups that survived the dot-com crash, is also providing practical help. It's opening a startup accelerator this year in Seoul's version of Silicon Valley, the Taeheran Valley. That area will also house a government-led tech startup campus and the 3rd Google campus in the world.
The success of startups is key to realizing the government's creative economy plan, which in turn is key to getting the economy back on its feet. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
With more Koreans choosing to stay healthy by drinking water over other beverages, the domestic bottled water market is enjoying quite a boom. We're even seeing a rise in trendy water shops with staffed experts that aim to get customers hydrated the right way. Here's our Park Ji-won with this week's Industry Insight.
Korea's bottled water market is estimated to hit about $5.5 million in 2014. The market has almost quadrupled over the past 15 years, and last year alone it grew by some 10%. Currently, there are around 100 domestic brands of bottled water in Korea, but the hands-down top seller is Jeju Samdasu, the #1 brand for 16 years running. Let's take a look. Jeju Samdasu has been the invincible market leader since it was launched in the late 1990s. Produced and bottled by the Jeju Special Self-Governing Province Development Corporation, Jeju Samdasu racked up some $206 million in sales revenue last year, a market share of over 35%.
Jeju Island's volcanic rocks function as a natural filter, resulting in clean and naturally mineral-enriched water.
With Jeju Samdasu firmly in the lead, the competition for the #2 spot has been fierce. As of the end of 2014, Baeksansu, a brand launched in 2012 by food and beverage conglomerate Nongsim, has taken the highly coveted second position with a 5.4% market share. While Korea's bottled water market grew about 10% last year, Paeksansu's revenue expanded over 30% from the previous year. With the growing interest in health and well-being in the nation, sales of bottled water have outpaced the sales of juice, which tends to contain sugar and artificial colors, for the first time. Now that water is one of the most popular beverages, consumers are developing a water palate and a flair for water and food pairings. And premium water bars like this, which sells over 100 bottled water brands, are gaining a foothold. At the bar, water sommeliers offer their advice about which types of water will best suit consumers' needs.
Now that drinking bottled water is now considered as a part of a health and beauty regimen, the market's growth is expected to accelerate in coming years.
Another fast-growing segment is sparkling water. While still in its infant stage, the fizzy drink has quadrupled its market share in just 5 years, and it's estimated to have reached some $32 million last year. And being that it accounted for about 70% of all imported bottled water in Korea, it's estimated to grow at an even faster rate than the still water market. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Top diplomats from across the European Union have gathered in Brussels to tackle the growing threat of terrorism sweeping the continent.
With more, we turn to Paul Yi at the News Center. Paul, this meeting comes after dozens of suspected jihadists were arrested in massive raids last week. What's on the agenda today?
Well, the foreign ministers from the 28-nation bloc have been summoned to discuss a range of measures to respond to radical Islamists, especially in the wake of the deadly Paris attack on Charlie Hebdo. But in addition to beefing up police operations, as you just mentioned, the European Union is seeking more allies in this fight against terrorism. On Monday, the top delegation called for strengthening security cooperation between Arab countries and Europe. Ahead of the conference, the EU's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, stressed that the issue was not between the West and Islam.
Terrorism and terrorist attacks are targeting most of all Muslims in the world. So we need an alliance, we need a dialogue there to face the issue together. And I think that respect is also one of the main core values of the European Union. And drawing the line between the freedom and respect has always been one of the main philosophical even dilemma.
Aside from the counter-terrorism policies, EU ministers will be hammering out ways to resolve the escalating crisis in Ukraine. Apart from fresh sanctions against Moscow, many expressed dialogue between the Ukrainian government and the pro-Russian rebels was the key to bring peace to the war-torn region. Authorities in the U.S. are investigating reports of multiple gunshots fired near the home of Vice President Joe Biden. Police in Delaware are working with the Secret Service to assess the situation. No injuries were reported and no property damage has been found so far. It's been also confirmed that the vice president and his wife were not present during the shooting, according to Biden's office. The Secret Service said several rounds were fired on Saturday evening from a public road located several hundred meters away from the residence. Soon after hearing the shots, security personnel saw a vehicle fleeing the scene at high speed. Police did arrest one person after half an hour later when he tried to pass an officer who was securing the area. However, it's still not yet known whether the individual is tied to the shooting. And shifting to West Africa, the government of Mali has declared the country Ebola-free after fighting off a second wave of infections last month. Addressing the nation on Sunday, Mali's Health Minister Ousmane Kone said it was concerted efforts of local health workers and international partners that helped stop the spread of the virus. At one point, health officials there have been closely monitoring over 300 Ebola cases. Mali became the 6th West African country to report cases of Ebola after a 2-year-old girl from Guinea died in October. According to the World Health Organization, Ebola has killed more than 8,400 people in the region. And finally, taking a brief look at the economy, a fresh study from the charity group Oxfam expects the wealthiest 1% will surpass more than 50% of the world's wealth by 2016. The report comes ahead of the World Economic Forum in the Swiss city of Davos, which will kick off on Wednesday. The charity organization is demanding urgent action to tackle poverty and the growing divide between the rich and poor. On Monday, the director of Oxfam, Winnie Briam-Yimna, described the scale of the global inequality as staggering. The World Economic Forum in Davos is slated to run through this Saturday and is expected to attract top political and business leaders from around the world. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Stephen Che with the Sports Brief. Now, with the Australian Open of Tennis opening Monday, the Asian Cup final group stage matches of Group C had to share the limelight. But in Brisbane, it was all about Iran taking on the United Arab Emirates. And with a fortunate strike in stoppage time, Iran defeated the UAE 1-0 to take the top spot in the group. The UAE advances in second place. In the other match, Bahrain edged out Qatar to wrap up their campaign with the win. Meanwhile, South Korea took a day off from training ahead of their quarterfinal match against Uzbekistan on Thursday. The team fought through injuries and illnesses to go 3-0 in Group A, so the rest day was well-deserved, but they'll be back in action Tuesday. Coming home for the live games, first to the KBL. Let's jump to the tip-off in Seoul. Now the SK Knights squared up against Anyang KGC. And early shooting troubles for the Knights have KGC up by 8 at the half. Action picks up in the second half, but KGC keeps the foot on the gas thanks to Oh Se-gun as they stun the league's top team and snap a 7-game skid. And over to pro volleyball, there were 2 matches on the night, starting with the men in Asan. Now, the Uricard Hanse hosted the OK Savings Bank Russian Cash. And early on, Simon and the Russian Cash laid down the spikes. Now, the Bees cruise in this one, taking the straight sets victory. Meanwhile, the GS Caltex Kicks and Korea Expressway Zenith go the distance as the top-ranked Zenith are pushed to the 5th set for the first time in over a month. They hold on to earn the win, their 8th straight over the last 4 weeks. And finally, over to the U.S., the Seattle Seahawks and New England Patriots are headed to Super Bowl 49 after being crowned the National and American Football Conference champions. The defending champion Seahawks defeated the Packers in overtime, and the Patriots trumped the Colts in the conference finals to move on to the big game. Now, the Seahawks are considered the slight favorites, but the early odds have started to even out due to the Patriots' dominating win on Sunday. The teams get a week off before Super Bowl 49 kicks off in Arizona on February 1st. And that's all I have for now. Your weather's up next. Have a good night.
Hello, I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the latest weather updates. If you are headed out, make sure to dress warmly as conditions may feel colder than the actual numbers due to the wind chill. On the other hand, air conditions remain very dry over on the eastern coastline. Tomorrow is Daehan here in Korea, which is one of the indicators marking the coldest day of the season. However, temperatures should rise above average levels by the afternoon. Looking ahead, it seems like warm winter conditions will stick around for a while, but on Wednesday, showers are forecast to begin down south before spreading nationwide and could possibly lead to snow in some places as the mercury drops. Moving on to Tuesday's readings, Seoul makes it 2, 4, Daegu and Gwangju 8, Busan hits 6 at 10, that is. On to other regions, Jeju makes it 2, 8, Dokdo 6, Mount Kumgang -2. Those are the updates I have for you now, and here's a look at the international weather.
And that's primetime news for this Monday. Thanks for watching. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Tae-ri. Have a great evening. We'll see you again soon.